continue to him because his uncles were also assassinated. And there are those of us who walk around today with no sense that my father could be assassinated. And the reason why we know we can't walk around with that is because my father is not saying anything that will disrupt the status quo ante.
Uh-oh, that's right. That's right.
My father is so accommodating to the existing politics, to the existing reality, that he's not prepared to say, this is wrong and this is right, and take a position like Malcolm, like King, like Amilcar Cabral, like Biko, like Rodney, and the list goes on, like Patrice Lumumba, and say, this is wrong. We are not prepared today to say anything is wrong, because we've got to keep our JOB. We've got to put food on the table. We've got to make sure that our children survive in school. We've got to do all these things that accommodate us. And because we are terrorized on a daily basis by those who work for the state apparatus, called the CIA, the FBI, and etc., who come into our midst and take back what we say and betray us, no different from Peter, from Judas, and from all the others, and Paul and others who did exactly that. We must come to grips with that. So that Malcolm talks about his mother and his father's death, but he's coming to grips with something that is very important to us in the 20th century, and important to us in earlier periods, but we don't look at it very carefully. He talks about death at an early age. Death at an early age. He's expecting to die at a very early age. Now, we have accommodated ourselves to we shooting and killing each other in the streets at an early age, but we're not accommodating ourselves to political death at an early age. Not Steve Biko, not Cabral, not Fanon, not Malcolm, not Martin. We're not accommodating ourselves to that because that's not what we're talking about. We spend most of our conversations talking about the brother in Southeast. Shooting another brother as we look at it on the news and talk about, look what black people have come to. Malcolm didn't engage in that. He said we were beyond that. We're somebody else. So death at an early age, whether it is Charlie Christian, a musician, whether it is name any of the musicians. Charlie Parker, whoever it is, just go on, the list goes on. Death at an early age. For those who speak out, and those who are prepared to protest and argue and redefine reality in the world that we live in. The next one is being put in an insane asylum. Whether it is Buddy Bolden, whether it is Theodonis Monk, whether it is Mingus, whether it is Charlie Parker relaxing at Camarillo, or Bellevue for you with Bud Powell, put in an insane asylum, whether it is Sterling Brown. And we forget that our people are put in insane asylums because they are considered to be crazy for speaking the truth. And Malcolm, therefore, had to deal with that reality. He says, when I saw my mother in the insane asylum after 20 years, I couldn't recognize her. I couldn't speak to her. I was in tears. I didn't know what to do because my mother had been put away because she, as a light-skinned black woman from Grenada, married a blue-black man from Mississippi who was a Garveyite, when she could have chosen anybody else as a Caribbean person. And Caribbean people don't deal with that reality of Malcolm's mother. I want us to understand that is one of the problems, because we don't even want to get close to Africa in terms of who we have relationships with. Far less to do what Malcolm's mother did and raise these children. That's a real problem for us. Still is a problem in the age of 21st century Reconstruction, where the mulattoes have taken over.
That's right. That's right.
Malcolm was very clear about that, the role of the mulattoes in our history. We mustn't get away from that. So we have to deal with that. But we're blacker than thou. We're blacker than black. We blue, black, 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 blue, black, blue, black, black, black in Baltimore. That's who we are. People in Baltimore refer to you as black, black. They don't just say you're black. In order to make sure that you are defined by reality when they see you. I've always been amazed at that when I go to Baltimore, Paul Coates notwithstanding. But it is very real for us. So Malcolm deals with that. And then Malcolm deals with not only death at an early age, and not only insane asylum, but he deals with jail. Those of us who protest, those of us who argue, those of us who say that the society, that capitalism is bankrupt, that our social metrics has nowhere to go, those people end up in jail. Understand that. And they say, like George Jackson and Malcolm, when I go to jail, that's when I begin to study. Well, that is a very fascinating question for us. I have a list of 99 books that George Jackson had in his room that he studied and read and so on. And I guarantee you that nobody in this room, including myself, have read 25% of those books. They're incredible. I have the list, actually. We haven't read them. And suddenly our children haven't learned 1% of those books. That's what makes it even frightening, because those books are not used at Howard or UMBC or Harvard or Princeton or Hampton. And they're not complicated books, you know, they're very simple books that we all should read. They're all they're in this building here. All of those books are here. But we haven't read them, because we really don't have the desire to read them. We would rather look at television, or we would rather be recolonized by consumerism. So we have the cell phones, and we would rather send text messages than read and study, like Malcolm and George said. They said, we studied, and they aren't the only ones either. So jail becomes another issue for us. And Malcolm had to live with that. We spend all our lives telling our children we don't want them to go to jail, and we don't want them to mix with people in jail, and we don't want them to go in jail and teach and help. And we want to keep them away from that, because they represent the worst of the worst. But they produced a Malcolm. How come? He says that's where he found it. I'm not suggesting that you just go to jail, but I'm saying, oh gosh, why should we be so disposed about this experience of jail when it is an essential part of our historical reality, and some of the best minds have come out of that experience? Why should we respect those minds? But you see, if we dismiss jail, then we dismiss Malcolm in a very interesting and indirect way. In other words, it helps us also to dismiss Malcolm. And it helps those of us who are academics and intellectuals to dismiss Malcolm. Because there's a difference between going to jail and going to Harvard. There's a difference between going to jail and going to Hampton. Do you understand that? So we dismiss them as not being relevant and important. Whatever they said doesn't make any sense. And there we are. And if we go around the world, we find the same issue. Whether it is in Nkrumah or Lumumba, whether it's Gandhi or Nehru, whoever it is. But we have a concept now, and therefore our preoccupation with going to jail now is a way of escaping the reality of what jail means at this point in time. The last one is exile. We all go into exile, whether it's James Baldwin, Richard Wright, everybody. I am an exile. We all have no country, no place that we belong to. And therefore I ask myself, couldn't Martin and Malcolm and others have gone into exile into Africa, or did they have to stay here to die? And if they predicted their deaths, was that an act of suicide? If you predict your death and you walk straight into death, did John the Baptist commit suicide? Did Malcolm commit suicide? Because in the 21st century, suicide is a different kind of problem. In the 20th century and the 19th century, when you commit suicide, you go straight to hell. You don't even go to purgatory like a Catholic like me. And I'm a Catholic, I get a chance in purgatory. You go straight to hell. Straight to hell, after you've done that. But in this new dispensation, people are saying you commit suicide and you go straight to Allah. How do we reconcile that in Christian orthodoxy, where most of us are members of Christian orthodoxy? What then does suicide mean? And how do exile people deal with that? Is it easier for us to live in Washington, D.C. and New York and Chicago than it is for us to live in the Congo,
See?
or Cameroon,
Yes, sir.
or Ethiopia? Is it easier? Or Trinidad, or Jamaica? Is it easier? We have to answer that question. And Malcolm made up his mind. He said, look here, I am not going to stay in exile. They offered him opportunities to stay in Africa, to stay in the Middle East. And he said, no, I'm coming back. To do what? To deal with my fate and my faith. Two very interesting words, F-A-T-E and F-A-I-T-H. I have faith in my fate, and my fate determines my fate. How do I do that? Is Malcolm playing games with us, or with himself, or with others? But we're preoccupied with the split between Malcolm and the nation when there are much more important things. This is a man that felt very passionately that his moral life had a very important relationship to his political life. Now that is not very easy for most of us. Because if we live in an immoral society, and we don't have to turn to the governor of South Carolina, or we don't have to turn to whoever it is we want to turn to. If we live in an immoral society, how do we then ask people who live in an immoral society to be moral? It becomes almost impossible. And how do we define that morality? Do we define it only in terms of our political interests? So that our leader could receive a Nobel Prize and make a speech on behalf of the validity and the significance of war. It's unbelievable contradiction. And I say, if Malcolm was alive, I could imagine how we would have taken that language and what you would. How do you receive a peace prize and then give a justification for just war? That is awesome. And therefore we cannot claim that we remember Malcolm and we love Malcolm and we feel Malcolm, and these things happen right in front of us and we don't deal with them. We said, well, I'm not going to deal with that, you know. If the man give a speech, that's his business. He get a Nobel Prize, I'm glad for him. What else he gets some money to? That's nice. I wish he would send some for me too. But where is the discourse? Where is the dialogue around war and the validity of war? Where is the discourse? Malcolm is deeply immersed in our foreign policy and prepared not only to speak about foreign policy in Harlem and the Harlems of the USA, but prepared to go to Cairo and make a speech in Cairo. And we don't even know the speech Malcolm made in Cairo before the Organization of African Unity. I know you wrote that speech. I know you got it in there. You wrote it. You understand that? I'm saying that those speeches are no longer made. So it means that we have to go back, those of us who claim Malcolm, and read those speeches again and ask, what was he saying? We can't just like Malcolm because he was cute. We can't like Malcolm because he was hip or cool, as the young people would say, everything is cool. But we got to like Malcolm because we know what Malcolm said. We know what Malcolm stood for. We know what he believed in. We've got to go deep inside and make sure that our children, our grandchildren, and everyone else have some sense of the dignity of this man, his very essence, his sense of being, and his sense of responsibility, not only to the past, but to the present and the future. Because it is in Malcolm, and the changes in Malcolm, that demand certain changes in us. We are not ready. That's why we have been pushed back so far in our revolutionary pursuits. We're not ready because we've chosen not to be ready. We've chosen not to get ready because it is too dangerous. And we have been inundated with fear. With a certain kind of fear that is exactly at the same level of the terror that existed in the 18th century, in the 19th century, and in the early part of the 20th century. A terror that deepens in our consciousness and never allows us to say, I am, therefore we exist. Thank you very much.
Good evening, and I also want to thank the Sankofa for having this event this evening. I am a member of I was elected in January as a member of the board of directors of the Malcolm X Bennett Shabazz Center in New York, which is there in the space that was the old Audubon Ballroom. In fact, the part that makes up the center is actually where the stage was. It is very weird to go to that place and be in that space and know that that the stage is no longer there, but the part of the building that became the center is the part where the stage was, where he was assassinated. But I decided that I was going to come here tonight rather than go up to New York to the event there.
Thank you.
What Brother Malcolm meant to me was a concept that I developed in 1985 when I began to first get speaking engagements to speak at colleges and universities about him. And I was trying to figure out a way to make him real talking to students. At the time, well, not at that time, but before that, I had been an associate director of the Black Theater Alliance. The Black Theater Alliance was an umbrella organization of about 60 black theater and dance companies around the country, of course, most of them being in New York City. I lived in New York City from 1962 to 1986 in Harlem. And I always noticed that the dance community, the top dancers, people who we considered master dancers, if a Catherine Dunham or Pearl Primus or Tally Beattie was in town and doing a workshop, these dancers who we thought were at the absolute top of their field would rush to take those classes. They call them master dance classes. And it was from that I developed the concept that, to me, Brother Malcolm was and is a master teacher.
Yeah.
And there's no more important member of any community than a master teacher. Now, I got this on a very first time I recognized this, although I did not have the concept at the time, was the very first time I heard him speak. It was the summer of 1962. I had just moved to Harlem. Believe me, I moved to Harlem grudgingly, only because a friend of mine's mother had a boyfriend who had to go to Arizona because of his health. And he lived in an apartment on 142nd Street, had 8 rooms for $56 a month. I said, for a rent like that, boy, I take my chances in Harlem. I had very negative attitudes about Harlem at that time. So I moved in on a Friday night, and that Saturday, my roommate and I decided to walk down Lenox Avenue, which is now Malcolm X Boulevard. And we got to 116th Street and saw a crowd gathering. And when we asked what's going on, they said Malcolm X is going to speak. That's what the mosque was, mosque number 7. So we said, at that time we had heard of him vaguely, usually boogeyman type things, hated white folks, white devil, all white people were devils, and that's what we had heard about him. So we stopped and got involved in the crowd, and he spoke for about 3 hours, very hot that afternoon. And the thing that I learned immediately from that speech was that he said that we're not up against George Wallace and Senator Eastland and Bull Connor and those boys. We are up against a system of white supremacy.
Amen.
And we have to look at it that way. The traditional civil rights movement gave the impression, I think they did it unintentionally, that if you got rid of George Wallace and Eastland and some of the Klans, a few people like that, then everything was going to be cool. Brother Malcolm said no. We live in a system, a society under which there's a system of white supremacy. That immediately changed my way of looking at things. Because I had never thought about it like that. I was 24 years old. I had been a part of the civil rights movement. I had my first political activism at Howard University. I was a student there when the Greensboro sit-ins occurred. And we used to pick at the Woolworths at 14th 14th and Irving Street, I think it was. We used to picket that over to show our support for the brothers who was picketing down and those who was sitting in down in Greensboro, North Carolina. That was my first political activism. So I've been a part of the traditional civil rights movement. And after that, I became an instant Malcolmite. I began to, wherever he spoke in the New York City area, I would go to listen. And the more I listened, the more I learned. When he mentioned books, we would go try to find the books. He mentioned an article, we try to read the article. And this is the way it went. I couldn't be involved with him because I was not prepared to become a Muslim. And at that time, you had to be a member of the Nation of Islam to have any kind of real serious involvement with him. And I was, I had kind of just dropped Christianity, as a religion, and I was not ready to go into another religion. So I said, I had no way I was going to become a Muslim. Plus, even though I had dropped Christianity, I loved gospel music. Now, I used to tell my Muslim friends that when y'all don't have gospel music, so that kind of leaves me out. But he, and I would, everywhere he went in the New York metropolitan area, I would be there listening. And then one day in early January 1964, a friend of mine who was almost a quintessential AKA lady, and she worked right across the street from me, we would have breakfast together. And one day she said to me, you want to be a member of a new organization, from a black nationalist organization. Well, when she said black nationalist, I was shocked. Because, like I said, she looked like Miss AKA of the year. And that's the way I always regarded her, she worked at NBC as an associate producer at NBC, and so I just knew this, I never said anything, but I just figured that, like she was very much the, that she was very much, a part of the, the whole, AKA Lynch. So she said that I was shocked. She said, don't ask me no questions, just I'll call you on Saturday morning at 8 o'clock and tell you where to be and what, I'll call you Saturday morning at 8 o'clock, tell you what time and where to be. Saturday morning she called, told me to go to this motel on 153rd Street and 8th Avenue. Now that motel had a reputation as being what they call a hot sheets motel, where you could get rooms for 2 hours. And so I was kind of surprised when she told me that we were going to be having this black nationalist organization meeting in this place. But I was there on time. When I walked in, I saw Dr. John Henry Clark, John Oliver Killings, and a couple other people that I recognized. There was maybe about 10 people there. And I'd been there about 20 minutes. Still, I have no idea. About 20 minutes later, Brother Malcolm walks in with about 4 of his aides. And I mean, I literally almost fell off my seat. I had no idea that this is what this was going to be. And that's when we began the formation of the Organization of Afro-American Unity. So I said, and again, as I said, listen, I saw him as a teacher. Because he was teaching us. He was teaching us. And we were sitting there and listening, but we were part of the conversation. He encouraged us to talk. He was also a great listener. And a great leader has to be also a great listener. He would listen to what everybody was saying. And the organization was announced publicly in June of 1964. We met from January to June. And then it was announced publicly in June of 1964. Now, he was not around much of the time because he was too busy carrying out his foreign. OAAU, I think we were the only black organization in the country at that time that had a foreign policy. He had a goal of taking the United States government before the UN Commission on Human Rights for violating, for quote unquote, being unable or unwilling to protect the lives and property of black people. That was the foreign policy goal, and he worked on that, and he was traveling a lot. And during that time, I had, when everybody was volunteering to work on certain committees and do certain things, when it was my turn, the only thing left was the newsletter. Now I had no journalism. I barely knew what journalism was at that time. But I ended up volunteering to be the editor of the newsletter because he always insisted that you must have, an organization must have its own instrument for getting information out. I volunteered to do the newsletter, and that became my introduction to journalism. I was the editor of the newsletter, which the first issue was called the OAAU newsletter, then it became the Blacklash. And we named it that because there was a lot of talk about the white backlash. Yeah. So we decided to call our newsletter the Blacklash. That's how I got its name. The first article I ever wrote was about the killing of 15-year-old James Powell by that cop in Harlem that had launched the Harlem Uprising in 1964. That was the first article I wrote. I was the first person to reach the students who had been with the young man when he was killed by this policeman. And it was also there, again, that I learned from the master teacher. Because when he would call us from Cairo to get an update on what was happening, in the streets in terms of the uprising. So when it was my turn to speak with him, I read what I had written, and I said, eyewitnesses to the murder. And he stopped me. He said, no, Brother Peter, you can't call it a murder. Because murder and murderer are legal terms. And when, not if, when he is acquitted, he can sue you for defamation of character. He said, call him a killer and refer to it as a killing. Because he's a killer, and it's a killing no matter what the circumstances. That's the master teacher in action. Sure enough, I have a copy of that work here with me. I'll show you. We had the old-fashioned mimeograph machine. We had already run off about 600 copies of this thing. So rather than go back and rerun them, I sat down and scratched out the word murder and wrote killing at the top above it. And I still have that. I have a copy of that with me tonight. And sure enough, when Gilligan was acquitted, he sued Martin Luther King's organization and James Farmer's organization for putting out information referring to him as a murderer.
Wow. Oh my.
That was the master teacher in action. The master teacher also taught us, which is why those of us involved with Brother Malcolm never got put in jail for what we said. Because he told us that we have a meeting, a public meeting, and if anybody in that meeting stands up and says we ought to go bomb the subways, stop the meeting and put them out. Because 9 times out of 10 they were provocateur. Sit there. And if you have even a 5-second discussion of what he said, everybody can be picked up for conspiracy. And though they have a very weak case, they can keep you tied up in the courts for 2 or 3 years, using all your time, energy, and resources trying to stay out of jail. So we learned that, again, learning from the master teacher. I mean, the man gave myself and others like me, those members of the OAAU, we were all people, who believed in him and supported him politically, economically, and culturally. Muslim Mosque Incorporated were for those people who followed him from a religious perspective. I remember in 1963, when we had a rally around the killing of the little girls in Birmingham. And you know how long ago it was, because the act at the Apollo that week was Eartha Kitt. So you know if Eartha Kitt was at the Apollo Theater, we're talking like a long time. But she was at the Apollo Theater. And Jackie Robinson had pulled this event together. And Brother Malcolm spoke first. It had a flat truck. Big crowd in the streets. And it was the first time I think that I saw him where he expressed serious anger. I mean, he was angry at the killing of those, and the frustration of nothing happening behind the killing of those little girls. And when he finished speaking, he stepped down. There was a chock full of nuts on the corners of where 125th Street and 7th Avenue, which is now Adam Clayton Powell Jr. Boulevard. And chock full of nuts, for those of you too young to remember, was the Starbucks of the day.
That's right.
When you all consider Starbucks now, we consider chock full of nuts. And that was what it was in those days. And Jackie Robinson, of course, they had a big executive position with chock full of nuts. But I was kind of leaning up against the chock full of nuts window, just watching the action, and Brother Malcolm and and the Muslims with him, because he was instilling nation. And they came, and he was about 6 people from me. When Eartha Kitt came to speak, the people around Brother Malcolm began booing. They began booing her, and really would not let her speak. So I said to no one in particular, because at this time I had not met him. I said, I wonder why they're booing her. And he heard me. He looked down at me and said, because she doesn't like black men. And what had happened, she had written one of those articles in Ebony magazine about the 10 most fascinating men I know or something like that. And not one of them was black. And that's why they were booing her. And again, this was the first time I saw his ability and how people responded to him. When the last speaker spoke, they said the rally is over. The crowd said, no, we want to hear Malcolm X again. So they started, we want Malcolm, we want Malcolm. And jumping up and down and stopping cars. And Jackie Robinson, they paid him no mind at all. And Brother Malcolm got back up on the platform and said, no, brothers and sisters, we had a rally, now it's time to go home. And everybody went right off. Right off. Nobody said where everybody left. The place was cleared in about 2 minutes. That was the first time I personally saw how people responded to him. And they responded to him because he had integrity.
Yes.
And you knew that he loved black people. He would criticize. I mean, he could say some harsh things, but it was from, I guess what they nowadays call tough love. It was kind of like the tough love approach. And so I learned, and I listened, and I watched, and I absorbed as much as I could of what he was saying, what he was doing. Most people don't know that at that conference in 1964, I was telling Acklyn, I have a copy right here of the speech that he made at that conference. And as a result of that speech that he made, the OAU issued a resolution, and I know this was unprecedented. They issued a resolution condemning racism in the United States.
Yay.
I have a copy of the resolution here. And our newsletter is probably the only publication in the United States that published that resolution. Nobody else published it. It's like they do now. All these people write all these books, but they don't talk about that international thing he was doing. In December 1964, again, because of groundwork that he had laid, when they had the debate on the Congo in the United Nations, where the United States, I think it was France and Belgium, England and Belgium, had gone into the Congo claiming that they had to go in there to save these white nuns, from these African quote-unquote savages. When they're doing the UN debate, and I have copies of that statement, 2 African diplomats, for the first time in history, and I don't think it has happened since then. I don't think the UN ambassador from Guinea and the UN ambassador from Ghana, they basically said, if the United States says that it has the right to intervene militarily in the Congo to save those nuns, who's to say that we don't have a right to provide military assistance to the black folks in Mississippi?
Right. Amen.
That was unheard of. Oh, that was unheard of. What they basically, I'm kind of paraphrasing now, but what they basically said was, if the United States says it has the right to intervene militarily in the Congo to save those white nuns, then who's to say that we don't have the right to intervene militarily in Mississippi to protect black people who are being killed in Mississippi? That was unheard. This was December 1964. And I can imagine J. Edgar Hoover and those boys saying, that's it. That's it. This man's got to go. Because the newspaper article say that the U.S. diplomat, Adlai Stevenson, was the United States UN representative there, said they were astounded by those African ambassadors making that connection. It had never happened before, and I don't think it has happened since. I was lucky enough one time, he took about 6 of us he was invited to the Tanzanian mission to the UN, to a reception. And he took 6 of us with him. I was lucky enough to be one of the 6. And as a result of that, one of the speakers at our rally became Mohamed Babu, who was one of the great leaders from Tanzania. He spoke at one of our rallies. I don't know how I got it, but I have the speech that Ambassador Babu made with his corrections in it. I was you know, I got serious about this journalism thing, man. I began to bug Brother Malcolm when he was back. I said, Brother Malcolm, you need to write a letter for the an article for the newsletter. And so on February 20th, 1965, he came by our office in the Hotel Teresa, and he gave me an article for the next issue of the newsletter. And of course, he was assassinated the next day. No, the newsletter came out. But I still have that article. And in that article, he said, again, the teacher. He was talking about the importance of black people connecting with Africa. And although it was emotional, he gave a very practical reason for having that position. He said that when I was a child, people used to say, you don't have a Chinaman's chance. Which means you didn't have a chance in the world to do whatever you were trying to do. He said, well, they don't say that no more. Now that China is a force on the world scene.
That's right.
He said, well, that's what Africa has to be for us. We have to reach the point in our connection to people of Africa and around the world that if anybody messes with people, the continent of Africa will be strong enough to make sure that don't happen. That's why he was, besides the emotional, psychological reasons, that's why it was so important for him to do that. And he would believe that it was so important. The second thing he did, when he said that people often accuse me of not believing in progress. You know, because they were talking about how much progress had been made and all this progress. He said, well, when you have a master-servant relationship, and the master's making $100 a month, and you're making $10 a month, if the master starts making $1,000 a month, your situation is going to improve a little bit. He said, but that's not progress. Progress is when the master-servant relationship changes. And that has not happened. So that's why I don't go around, basically go around, talking about how much progress has been made. Those are two things that are in that article that he gave me on February the 20th, 1965. He was a brilliant man. And I will close by saying the other thing that he did for me, personally, and I think for all the rest of us, both the young brother and everybody has kind of mentioned that. He was the first person I heard who talked about the psychological assaults of white supremacy in the same breath as the physical assaults. The civil rights organizations basically talked about the lynchings, the beatings, the brutalities. Brother Malcolm talked about those, but he was the first person I heard who talked about the constant psychological assaults. And I remember him saying that, about the enslavement of our people. He said people always talk about the slave trader and the slave owner. He said, but they leave out a very important person. And that was the person that he described as the slave maker. And it was this person's job to take a people who had traditions, culture, history, and break them down psychologically so that slavery became economically viable. Because if you have people who you don't do that, and you might have 50 people enslaved, you might need 20 overseers to watch them. But if you can break them down properly, then you can do it with 2 overseers, and you can make much more money without having to pay those other 18 people. He was the first person I heard, talk about that. I'm not going to say nobody else ever did it. I say he was the first person I heard put so much emphasis on the psychological. And as we all know, while the physical assaults have been significantly reduced, the psychological assaults are relentless. And as relentless as ever. They have not ceased for one single second. They go on every single day on television and movies. I just saw an ad on the television they've been showing quite a bit for about the last couple of weeks from Intel. This corporation called Intel, where they are encouraging young people, going into the science and math. And they have an Indian-looking young man look like he's from India. Someone looking like from China. Someone looks like they're from European descent. And each one of them says why he or she if you're going into science. They flash a photograph of a young black man, and all he does is smile. Doesn't say a word. That's on this Intel commercial that is running right now. He does not say one word. Everybody else, they just show it, he's there, he got this big smile on his face and doesn't say a single word. But everybody else talks about why they are glad that Intel is providing this opportunity for them to study science. Brother Malcolm taught us how to be aware of that and how we must be as conscious of combating the psychological attacks of white supremacy as we are in combating the physical attacks. And I think it's very difficult to convince our people of that. They simply, a lot of my friends don't want to go to the movies with me because when I go to the movies, I'm analyzing everything. And they don't want to go. But that's why I refer to him as a master teacher. Because he taught us, and as I said before, there's no more important member of any community than a master teacher.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Brother Hopper, should we count how much time are we working with? Now the other thing that we want to do is we really want to make, as Acklyn and I sat down and figured this out, and mostly Acklyn figured it out. What we wanted to do, thank you. What we wanted to do on the one hand was to shape a perspective and give a context to a discussion on Malcolm. And the other thing we wanted to do is have a discussion that's interactive. We also want to have, and I think I'll start that off by asking the panel some questions, but we also want to have a session that speaks to how Malcolm is being interpreted today. Now, Acklyn, what do we want to do? Can I ask the question about the book at this point, or do we want to take questions from the audience?
Take questions from the audience.
Okay, Acklyn says take questions from the audience. Will somebody ask about the new Manny Marable book? Look, okay.
I just want to show you real quick. This is what the newsletter looked like. This was the last issue. Issue number 9.
Can you pass it around? Here is the only thing I will ask you. We just had the long presentations on who Malcolm is. Like, because we have so many people, there's no way that we can do that from the floor, okay? So I would ask that, I mean, you can make statements of who Malcolm is. We absolutely want that, but please do not make extended statements, okay? Because there will be folks on the floor that'll tap you or something like that, or else I'll walk back to you. But we want to have a discussion going on more so than having our experts. We got experts up here, okay? So from the floor.
The panel's opinion about the book, aside from those one or two seemingly to me trivial issues that don't really destroy the person who Malcolm X was for me.
Okay, could everybody hear that?
Yes.
Okay, the brother's really asking the panel to respond to Manny Marable's book beyond the trivial accusations, or if I can say that about your question, what he's referring to as trivial accusations about sexuality, about infidelity. He wants, most of the reviews that have been done that he's seen has been negative. How does the panel feel about that? Does that capture your question?
Let me just say first, to me it's difficult to separate the two, because if you look at what I consider innuendo, the lack of substantiation, and et cetera, on one part, then you might want to question, in my mind, other parts as well. To me, what was the purpose? I mean, I'm just saying, I personally could care less about a lot of those things that he inundated, okay, without even, I mean, he would set you up, but then doesn't even substantiate it. Okay, but that's one thing. But then the other thing, what I was surprised I didn't see more of, particularly since it was supposed to have been such an in-depth study and view and all like that, I would like to have seen some of those, much more than what was in there, those FBI documents. They would show more in context, just the level of surveillance and all like that was going on by the FBI. And I will say one thing, if all of that was going on, I can assure you it would have been in FBI documents. Not only in FBI documents, they would have been spreading those rumors back then at that time. Because they would have done anything. They were looking for anything, okay, to be able to destroy and split the movement. Now, maybe I don't know the extent of the COINTELPRO with respect to Malcolm in terms of what's available now, what's not available. But I know in terms of the documents that I have seen dealing with other movements that came just shortly after Malcolm, those just before Malcolm, there was enough to be able to have put more things in context with respect to just, what all was going on and around. So I just wanted to just suffice by saying, I don't think you can really separate the two myself.
Somebody else want to mention?
Well, I can't really, I have not read the book. I'm about halfway through the first chapter. I read the prologue, but of course I've had at least a dozen people have called me and read me sections from the book. And of course, with a couple of them about the section on the charges of this sexual orientation. And my point that I have on that, without having read the book, is that I feel certain that if the CIA, the FBI, and other Malcolm haters had that information, then they would not have had to have him assassinated. Because they would have been able to wipe him right off the map by putting that out into the public. So the fact that did not happen makes me a little bit, wary of. And the other thing I know about this book, I have a friend who's a professor over at Howard who's read it, and he said he has never seen a book with so many perhaps and were probablys and may in his life. It's supposed to be a book of scholarship. So I started reading it last Sunday, and I hope to have it read, in the next couple of weeks.
Can I just interject one thing? And I agree with you that the author makes a lot of, he extrapolates far too much for me, and I'm not a scholar of that degree. But again, for me, I didn't care, I care about whether the fact it was true that Malcolm X had a homosexual relationship, whether if that was a complete fabrication, of course I cared. But for me, from my perspective, I was like, whatever with that when I was reading it. I was reading more into, at least the specifics that I didn't know about his life, about, his mother going into an insane asylum, his house getting firebombed, his trip in Africa, the daily information that was going on one by one. Okay,
The panel is still responding. Do either of you want to respond to it?
I just, I'm gonna kind of split the difference here. How old are you? I'm just curious.
I'm 45.
Okay, all right. And I'm only asking because, I gotta be honest, I actually had a very similar reaction to you. And to be quite honest, I was wondering whether it was because we see different things. Like, I didn't really care. Like, it didn't really affect how I felt about Malcolm X, and the things that I value in Malcolm X are kind of irrelevant to whether he slept with a man or not. I mean, I'm just being straight about that. Having said that, I think, my co-panelists raise a good point about substantiation in the book, and I think that's a huge, huge problem. And I wish that was better, But in terms of what you said, I felt very much the same way. It just didn't have much to do with the value that I put on Malcolm.
Go ahead, you go ahead. Peter is about in the first chapter, I'm about halfway. And the reason why I'm halfway, I've had the book for a month. The reason why I'm halfway is because it's very hard. It's very difficult. I think it is important. Ta-Nehisi and I split the difference on this one. I think it's very important if you put something like that, not only perhaps, maybes, but other suppositions in and you don't support them, then it goes to the heart of the book. It goes to the whole belief, not just that accusation, So I have to read very, very carefully, much slower than any other book that I'm reading. I have to mark up this book. And I told Ta-Nehisi this, I've never marked up a book in my life because I believe books are sacred. That book is thoroughly marked, okay? And I'm just going to cool on it right there and let Acklyn do his. I'll come right back to you, Doc.
I had promised not to talk about this book. But you put it on the table, so let's deal with it. Firstly,
I think you're a master teacher, sir, so I'm just...
well, and I don't have to talk then.
Come on, Acklyn, come on.
I don't need that. I don't need what you just said.
Okay, go
I
ahead.
don't need it at all, at all, at all. So don't try to do that to me. Stay with your question and keep quiet. Keep quiet and let us talk. You talk twice. All right. I say that for a 45-year-old man who raises a simplistic question based on the fact that he couldn't care less about these things said about Malcolm. I'm very disturbed about that. That's why I'm going to talk. Firstly, the book was researched and done over a period of 10 years. 10 years, and it is a Columbia University project. It's stated in the book. It is also stated in the book that the leading person in the book is a man named Richard Cohen, a Jewish man. You see, if you don't want to read that, then we can't talk about the book and the simplisms. Now, the second person is an Indian boy named Ali,
Yes.
born in India, but of Pakistani parentage, at Columbia, who is a student of Manning. We have to keep the facts, you know. That's what Malcolm always did. Next is that this book in the last 3 years, Manning has been sick with massive heart attacks and massive medical problems, which meant to me that Manning didn't have did much work in the last 3 years. Which means to me then, as a Columbia project, that this is a setup and Manning dies on the day the book is published. That's not an accident of history. Those things don't fall out of the sky. That had nothing to do with Jesus. It has to do with how I think. You understand that? Just like Malcolm's death is not an accident of history. And he himself talks about it. So that the publishing of the book and the death of Manning, and my mother used to say, let the dead bury the dead. You understand that? So I want to stay away from Manning and this book. However, now let's deal with the payoff on the book. And the reason why he dies is because he cannot what? Explain what he did. The mic. He cannot explain what he did. He's not here. So we can't hear from him. So we have to do what? Speculate for the next 5 or 10 years. We have to speculate. And what the speculation brings, it brings irresponsibility in terms of our analysis and giving preference to that which was done as called serious and academic work. In addition to which, 3 people support the book and said that this is the definitive study on the book. Cornel West, Skip Gates, and Michael Dyson. These 3 people don't agree on anything else except this book is the most important book. That's not a coincidence of history. That's a payoff. Any mafia would tell you that. You get paid to do that. Don't be, we can't be silly up inside of here.
Yes.
All right. Now, let's deal with the context of the book. Let's deal with the context of the book. The book makes sure that it destroys everybody in the book and then leaves the author as the only source and the only person standing. That is what is called deconstruction and then reconfiguring of Malcolm. That's what it said it does, and it executes that. Now if Cohen had published that book because this boy couldn't finish it, you would be mad today about the book and what it said. Now what does the book deal with in deconstruction? It deconstructs Malcolm as a man who couldn't be trusted and as a person whose names Satan, Detroit Red, and all of these were not artificial constructs in order to provide a certain image of him. And that he was party to that. The book says that this man, it was not the same person in all his different images, and they were reconfigured in a certain kind of way that he himself was party of. Means that he wasn't honest and he wasn't for real. We're talking about a real man here today. The books suggest that he wasn't for real. Secondly, the book suggests that Betty, his wife, after not interviewing his children, that Betty, his wife, was what? Unfaithful to him, and that he was unfaithful to her. Now that means that is very real for black people who are unfaithful to each other, historically. From then till now, we have been unfaithful, and you unfaithful to me, and I'm unfaithful to you. It has nothing to do with sex, it has to do with fidelity and morality. Not sex! It has nothing to do with sex. Once you have been able to take that fidelity and morality, and my word is my bond. Because Malcolm says, he said, Betty was the only person he was telling precisely what was happening to him on an everyday basis with regard to his life and death. He said that. Listen, he said that. I have it here in a quote. And he says not only that too, that he calls upon this woman on the day that he's going to die. When he knows he's going to die, he calls her from a hotel and says, come and bring the children. Could you do that with your woman? You know you're going to die and you will be shot mercilessly, not by the people who you claim they're being shot at, because Malcolm said it was bigger than them, it was run by the state apparatus. Even though they may play a part in it. Malcolm said the state apparatus was responsible for my death. And we have to blame the state. And he tells her to come and be a witness to this moment in time. Knowing that the problems that the children will have to face for the rest of their life would not be an easy one. Because none of us can hook up with Malcolm's daughters to take care of them in the way that Malcolm wanted them to be taken care of. Because we too goddamn coward. Fear is in our hearts. So therefore we don't want to have nothing to do with Malcolm's 5 or 6 daughters. Right? That's the second part. He makes Ella into a prostitute, a whore, or whatever it is you want to make Ella into, but not the kind of woman that Malcolm talks about. He turns Ella into a monster, a Frankenstein monster, that nobody could get along with, including Malcolm. She was not a loving person. Malcolm doesn't speak of Ella in that way. And I met Malcolm close up in Boston. I never spoke of Ella like that, but this man speaks of Ella. I knew Betty on a day-to-day basis going to lunch with her. Betty never said those things, but he did. And you will tell me I must be indifferent to that? What I know I must be indifferent to. The problem with us is that we don't know. And because we don't know, we let other people who we think know tell us. Because the book has 600 pages, therefore, we let them decide for us what we know. I know what I know because I put in 10,000 hours every year studying and reading and thinking and reflecting with my friends. That's how I get to know. I don't get to know because I read some stupid ass book by somebody. Finally, he makes the Nation of Islam, whom we have disliked from day one. We've always disliked the Nation of Islam. When Malcolm came to Harvard, he talked about 8 or 10 of us who came to hear the lecture. And when we walked into the lecture, the 8 or 10 of us, we walked in and we see all these black people sitting down there at the lecture at Harvard University. And you know what? You know what we said? What are they doing there? Because we were one in each department. It was fully integrated. One in law school, one in business school, one in philosophy, one in religion, fully integrated. And therefore we didn't want those black people in there from the Nation of Islam. Because we didn't know how they would get on or whether they would ask questions with green verbs, etc. And Malcolm gave one of the most brilliant speeches in his life. And when he was finished, he said he wanted to talk to the 8 of us. And we showed up. And he asked the 8 of us to come and help him, like he asked Brother Peter. And come and work with him and help him. And you know what all of us said, including me? Sorry, my brother, I can't go with you. I got to go with integration. I got to go with it. We turned Malcolm down. All of us turned him down. That's the Malcolm I knew. And you know what? He laughed. And you know what my excuse was? As a Trinidadian, you know what, brother? I can't deal with your organization because, you know, I grew up eating whatever I could get as a poor black boy. So pork chops was always important to me. And I cannot be in a relationship with no organization or religion that says what? That women must wear things over their head and long dresses. I want to see some legs. I want to see some arms. And you know what? I'm saying all of that, and he looked at me and he just laughed at me. And he says, brother, you know, yeah, you telling the truth. You from Trinidad, I know that. But you know what? I never stopped to think the nuns wore the same kind of clothes. I never stopped to think of that. And I didn't have anything against them, but I had something against Muslim women. I had to deal with whether we would move from Victoria's Secrets in the 19th century and Victoria Prudery to what? Victoria's Secrets in the 21st century, where women take off all their clothes and we want to make them happy with no clothes on, because that's what Carnival in Trinidad is all about. That's Malcolm. That's Malcolm. So I want you to say that, don't take this book and tell me what you don't care about this and you don't care about everything said in that book. Strips Malcolm apart, strips the nation apart, strips Betty apart, strips Ella apart, strips all of us apart, and say that what we thought we were fighting for is absolutely irrelevant in the age of Obama. That book is written for gentrified people. It is written for a new white population in urban America and around the world. To really find a man who supported the Bandung Conference, who supported the Congo, who supported Nkrumah, who supported office one after the other, and you will tell me nothing about that is written in that book or dealt with who the people Malcolm knew. They're not accidents of history. We are very real people. And stop, my brother, as much as I love you, stop being so simplistic and talk about you don't care who Malcolm sleep with. Yes, I care who my woman sleep with, and I care who I sleep with.
That's right.
I always will care. Because I may be sleeping with the enemy. And I will die as a result of that.
That's right.
The brothers behind you.
I'd like to thank this august body for sharing with us the ideas. And I'm Brother Oduno. I am a Garveyite since 1968. The Evergreen Division number 50 in Seattle, Washington. And just to give you some context, I don't have to talk about my history here in Washington, D.C. What does Malcolm mean to me? As what was expressed in terms of Malcolm being a master teacher, I just want to share that Malcolm listened to the genius of our people. And there are women, Sister Ella has already been named. There's Jewel Rosebud Crawford Mazik, 1937 graduate of the History Department with a master's degree and 1957 graduate. And there's Pauline Myers, who was the National Secretary for Asa Philip Randolph. One thing about being a master teacher, you got to first be a master student. That's right. And Malcolm was a master student, whether he was in elementary school, whether he was in the Nation of Islam, whether he was Detroit Red, he was a master student. And I take from him that in order to be put in authority as a master teacher, you got to first go through the crucible of the flame of being a master student. And there are too many of us. We want to have a microwave arrival rather than going through the fire in the Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Community League, that what you do today for your people, it makes impact to the generations not only today, but the yet unborn. But remember that a master teacher has to be a master student.
Brother Duno, thank you.
Let me sit down.
Thank you, brother. Look, I'm going to ask y'all to bear with me. Try to keep your questions short. I leaned up on Acklyn. Acklyn's my elder, and I have never seen Acklyn's button push like that. Okay? His button got pushed. I was wondering whether it was something generational. No, really, it was beautiful. But
Paul,
oh, wait a minute. Holly is calling my attention.
Paul, I think we're dissipating something.
Okay.
Because in Acklyn, I mean, so he poured it.
Okay, Holly.
No, I'm saying he poured his heart on one issue, very important
Yeah.
issue, that I think is very important in terms of, no, I can be heard. It's, yeah, you can.
Because I'd like you to speak backwards. Because I hear what you're saying. I hear what Acklyn is saying. I don't think that's what this brother is saying, and I don't think that's what Ta-Nehisi is saying. I really don't. Even though I have different positions. And so what I'm hearing is a dynamic.
Okay, let's hear
For
it.
us to examine ourselves.
Let's hear the spokesman
I would like to
with Garvey's thing. Go ahead.
My name is Brother Kaba. I read the book. I had seen Manning Marable on Democracy Now! A couple of times over the years, and I was very excited by what I had seen in the interviews. I was looking forward to this book at the time. I have been in media myself for about 16 years. One thing I know about media, and this goes to that point about whether or not it matters, you can tell what the stress is going to be on a project by how it is sold. They always want, in the business I'm in, we want to market to you. We have to find things that are going to sell. And in this society, which is a pretty decadent society, more salacious things are going to be what is going to be put out there to sell.
I had the opportunity to read numerous letters that between Brother Malcolm and Sister Ella. Letters that we were going to publish in the book, but the publisher would not allow us to do so. The publisher's lawyers say that we couldn't do it because I found out that if you write someone a letter, the letter belongs to the person who wrote it, not to the person who got it. And since the relationship between Sister Betty and Sister Ella was not exactly the best relationship in the world, the publisher was afraid to publish those letters that we had between Sister Ella and Brother Malcolm. But in that, I found those letters fascinating because I actually saw Brother Malcolm in those letters like a younger brother talking to his big sister. He regarded her as one of his major confidants. So this whole idea that she was some kind of reckless person, you would never know it if you read those. I read those letters in which he looked to her for advice, and she would also jump on him. She wanted him to pack his bags and take his family and take one of those jobs that he was offered in Africa. That was her position. You have done enough. You have helped. You've contributed. Now take your family and leave. And he wouldn't do so. That's exactly. He wanted her to. She wanted him. She said, "You need to shut up. Don't say nothing about those women, who had, children by Elijah Muhammad. Those were grown women. They were not babies. They made a decision. So you stay out of it." But I found out that why he couldn't stay out of it to some degree was that one of the women was a young woman who had been in love with him, who had followed him from Boston to New York. And in order to kind of get her out of his hair, because he would devote his whole time to what he was doing in terms of the movement, he kind of recommended her for a job out in Chicago. And she ended up being one of the women who got pregnant. That was a very human thing. He felt a little bit bad about that. I got that from working on that book. I got a lot of family stuff that had never been published from working. I went to a little family reunion. Down in Orlando, Florida, with littles who still live in rural Georgia, and who do not want to be known as relatives of Malcolm X to this day, because they were afraid that it would cause them problems. I mean, we can say they are in rural Georgia still. They went to the churches where Earl Sr. used to be an itinerant pastor. When we were working, we went down there to that part of Georgia. So I try my best, to be cool sometimes. When I like Acklyn, I get upset when I hear people talk about the harshness. When I shut them up? One day, I sat down and took down all the names of all the people who had been lynched between 1955 and 1965, and I read them off. I say there was rampant terrorism going on in this country at that time, and that's what he was responding to. And when I said that, nobody else raised the question about the harshness of his speeches, because they never thought about that. He was responding to rampant terrorism that happened between 1955 and 1965. And so whenever I go speak now, I start off by reading the names of all those people who were killed between 1955 and 1965. You know, one thing we learned from Brother Malcolm as a master teacher, he told us to do your homework. Because you know, when you go out to speak from our position, there are people in the audience whose sole purpose for being there is to catch you with your facts wrong. So he told us to make sure that whatever we do, try to make sure they might disagree with our interpretation, with our opinion, but they would never catch us with our facts wrong.
Okay. Could I just say one little thing quickly? Whenever we use a date, 1993, which is the publication of Perry's book, 1991, we must ask ourselves, what is happening in the world when that book is published? And if we look around at what is happening in the world in 1991 and 1993, we will see two worlds. Collapse of the Soviet Union and the emergence of China. When we look at 2010 and 2011, we must ask ourselves, what is happening in the world then? So we could put whatever it is we're reading in a larger context of understanding, so that we're not talking about Perry in abstraction. We're not talking about a book that is just written by a certain kind of man, and we got to do the research on Perry. And then we've got to ask ourselves, why did Cohen rely on Perry's book? That's what we've got to ask ourselves. What is the connection between Cohen's work and Perry's work? Because Cohen is still alive. You understand that? So we have to do a larger kind of thing. We've got to ask ourselves one last thing. When Malcolm speaks in 1964 in Cairo, good, under NASA, we've got to ask ourselves, who were the members and the heads of state that attended that conference? What decisions did they make? And what were the implications of their lives between 1964 and 1974? From Kennedy to Johnson to Nixon to Carter, as we move into the Carter and the age. We must ask those questions, because you can't take out and you'll find out who got killed, who got overthrown, what happened to each and every person that supported Malcolm in that point in time. You must do that body of work. If you don't do that body of work, you can't talk. That's what John Henry Clark used to teach us. If you don't do the work, you can't talk. Quiet and find out from somebody else. That's what Sterling Brown used to teach us. That's what C.L.R. James used to teach us. You've got to do the work in order to be able to come and talk to us.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to thank everybody for an excellent presentation. Today is a day we should celebrate. 86 years of the Shining Prince. And in closing, I would not be standing here right now as conscious as I see myself and working for the movement if I was not inspired by the way Malcolm came out of the street. I was in the street. So to all the young people under 50, take very serious note of what the elders are saying here now. Because now that I'm 60, I could have been anywhere in this world. But because I was motivated by Malcolm X coming out of the street into the movement and moving even beyond that and becoming a shining prince for black people all over the world who don't even speak English. We have to understand that there's an evil force that always is going to want to take away that motivation that still is a motivating light. I was at the March on Washington in 1963 at 11 years of age. I was motivated by Dr. King, but I would have never known Marcus Garvey if it was not for Malcolm X and for his mother and father and to be in the movement today. So young people, take heed to that, because the ancestors are still living in a bigger way than we can imagine. Do not slander them like you won't slander your mother. Always hold them to the highest of high. And never forget that man and woman is a disagreeable beast. Any one of us could fall low at any time. But when you give your life for humanity, like Malcolm did, you can't deal with what was happening when he was in the gutter. He came out of the gutter and became a shining prince. So really hear what the elders are saying here. Because if we let somebody else make us think less of the higher part of Malcolm, what do we think of ourselves?
The things that we're interested at Sankofa, as far as I'm concerned, is an issue of integrity.
Yes, sir.
And this thing that comes out of your mouth to a person. And I think the modality of Malcolm X internationally, I'm from Ethiopia, the way I know him is really through his integrity. Integrity. He could have been a politician, he could have said appeasing things for his personal life. He's a guy who died poor, but rich because he won the world for his principles and integrity. Now, you could, within the principle integrity, evolving and growing is not reinventing. I think what this book, the title alone, what it does subliminally is that Malcolm X was an eternal shyster. He invented. The black struggle could invent people like him. And the most important part is that he sets a modality of principle and integrity. To me, that's what's at stake, not the sexual thing. We talk about, for example, adultery. Okay? Within the partnership you enter. That is a very important issue now, as far as I'm concerned. I don't want to let go of that point because of how seriously our young people have not taken the value of words when we say, I love you. When we say, I will do, I'll marry you. It's connected. Struggle is nothing without this basic vocabularies of human relationship. You can never construct an abstract black thing. Why is it that a lot of the black leaders, including rappers, would do anything? Say anything. They say Malcolm's name, Martin's name, and then they're accused for raping an 8-year-old girl, etc., etc. I'm saying there's an integrity issue that our young people need to get from the past generation. And the sexual obsession culture of white America, when it permeates in black people themselves have become it. Then what alternative are they going to supply for the life of Malcolm X? For what he lived? What is the payment then to the world that respects him? And I'm saying, no, don't let go of something. I know this brother. I respect this brother. This brother is here. I respect him. You are. I respect you. You came here. I know how it's students who are not here who should be here. At my age, I'm still shooting a camera, setting a table. I've taught over how many students to be filmmakers? Where are they? Because they're carrying Jesse on a chair as a goddamn next king somewhere and not working on the ideas of things that they espouse in their mouth about black people. For black people, I'm for my people. It's all t-shirt bragging. And I'm saying, no. Malcolm X should be discussed to challenge you guys, not the ones who came here. This is what gets divisive. It's not you, it's not this brother here. There's a generation at my school, at Howard, where I teach. A word means nothing. Promise means nothing. Grade is to be given. If you don't give it, you're a bad teacher. If you love them and require them to work hard, they hate you. And the university evaluates you based on that and the kind of grade I refuse to give to you. A morality breakdown, a breakdown of principle and integrity. At a time like this, when white folks produce Malcolm, we should produce the counter issue of what he means to us. To me, he means to me. What is happening to my students now? I'm telling you, I'm about to leave Howard because not the administration, I've never been paid what I deserve. I can go anywhere in the world and be paid bigger than goddamn this place. But Howard kids have been my special love. From the day I came to Howard, I left the whole white Hollywood world to come to Howard to meet black kids from all over the world. For the past 5-10 years, I'm disappointed at the lack of integrity. If a teacher is stupid, so long as he gives a good grade, it's okay. If a student requires to say, listen, you're like my son. If you don't do homework, I want to fail you. I want to flunk you, to shock the hell out of you, to make you work next semester. I did this. I went to Germany, flunked about 4 of them. Even the dean was calling me all the way from Germany. I said, I don't dispense grade like UNESCO milk, okay? I don't give out, I give people who deserve grade. I flunk them because I love them. And I think this is what Malcolm means to me. Malcolm X means integrity and principle. And I'm still imperfect, like trying to grow, however old I am. All of us are this imperfect people. But what he means to us, what I would want my children, who are not even here, except maybe 1, is 2 maybe, and I have 6, okay? I can't beg him. Yesterday, Malcolm X's son was here. They were not here. I was angry. I wanted them to hear him. Okay, my own kids. I'm angry at my own kids for not being here. But I don't want to force them like a fascist also. So I am in this situation. But I want, when they date, who they date, who they go, I don't care where they go, but they better respect that sister. My sons better respect and have integrity for the shit they promised that woman. The same to my sister, my daughters. I will kill a black man who messes up with my daughters. That's why I say I don't want to meet your boyfriend, because I might end up killing him if he hurts you. Because I don't like black men the way they're treating black women now. I don't like it. I have 3 daughters. I'm scared like hell in the way they're treating the young women at Howard. Black men with good t-shirt, Malcolm X t-shirt, Martin and Malcolm t-shirt. Fashion, nothing, no principle, no integrity. I'm saying to you, I told them I don't want to be here today because what he means to me is integrity and principle. And this generation better be challenged. It's not Acklyn. Acklyn and me, we're going to go out of here. But it's you guys better require from your friends what they say to whoever they say. They better know there's a consequence to that word. In some societies, you get shot for the wrong word.
That's right.
Brother, I learned from everything you just said. I just want to kind of make clear my point.
No, I'm clear, my brother. I'm glad you're here. It's nice. I'm talking about the ones who are not here.
I'm saying Malcolm X was assassinated because they were feared all that he is and could become, right? What's kind of interesting is that the wise brother right here didn't even want to discuss the book, right? Because once the book comes up, we're going to be diverted from everything that Malcolm X really is. So I mentioned that denying that cardinal nature so that we can stay on the path of knowledge, right? So
okay, we're together. I don't disagree with you. I'm just saying it's not really about you. My frustration is the culture of young people, my brother,
all I'm saying is that
which you know.
We have to be aware of the concept of that cardinal nature.
Well,
what it does to us.
my brother, I mean, that's the gift you gave us this evening. To some of us, it's like some test we passed some years ago.
Let me just say something very quickly.
Cardinal.
One of the central issues that we face here in this society and in this world is our inability to deal with foreign policy questions. And so that the memory of the Haitian Revolution has disappeared from our consciousness. Whether it is Dessalines, or whether it is Toussaint, or whoever it has disappeared from our consciousness. But more importantly, it has disappeared from our consciousness as it relates to its impact on Gabriel Prosser, Denmark Vesey, and others, and Nat Turner, and David Walker. It disappeared. Now, David Walker and these other people have also disappeared from our consciousness in the 20th century. And we can look at that carefully. They are not part of our consciousness. We have no intentions of writing as journalists like David Walker. We have no intentions of being Nat Turner. We have no intentions of being Gabriel Prosser and organizing South Carolina in that way. However, we get into the 21st century, the 20th century, and as we become Garveyites, as we become Du Bois' people, as we become Malcolms and Martins, that organization, that body of work is now disappearing from us. It is now disappearing from us in the 21st century. We are in the age of Obama. We are in another world. And therefore we must come to grips with the world that we're living in. And coming to grips with the world that we're living in, the result of it in the first 10 years of the 21st century is the book of Malcolm X. The book of Malcolm X is a very strategic book that compels us not to think of Malcolm or study Malcolm from ourselves, but to do it from the point of view of people who are considered legitimate in academia. That's why it is not Manning Marable alone. It is Cornel West, it is Skip Gates, and it is Michael Tyson. And all around the country, we will... Michael Tyson. But all around the country, we are going to be gathering, and all the radio stations doing what? Discussing this book. That's going to sell 1 million copies. And engaging ourselves, rather than simply sitting down in our homes with our children and our women and our men and our friends and discussing seriously what we should read and how we should look at Malcolm without having to move in that direction. Now, finally, this man talks about people who belong to FBI and CIA people. And he suggests that in 1958 to 1964, 65 when Malcolm was that there were people who had penetrated the Nation of Islam and the organizations that Malcolm said. Who are those people? Are those people like us in this room? Or are they like Perry? Who are those people? We don't know who they are. But if those people were successful in penetrating us, that is defense intelligence. Whether it is the Mossad, the ESI, the CSI, wherever it is, if defense intelligence is important, and it has helped the national state structure to have a certain impact against us, whether it is the Black Panther Party or whoever it is, if it is, then how does this book, or how do we elevate ourselves to understand the significance of penetration into Sankofa books and our ideas and our discussions of trust and our elevation of analysis, so that we could be better prepared for the 21st century on the basis of the fact that people like us could betray us by working for the master's house. You understand that? And that's what Malcolm was trying to bring us to understand. That foreign policy issues, global issues, Malcolm was talking about global issues, that issues of democracy and the bankruptcy of democracy is right in front of us. And that's what we must be discussing. That's what we must be looking at. If we don't look at that, we will all be... I have a sister, I went to give a talk at Howard University, and this sister comes to me right after I gave this talk for Gareth, for what the brother on PFW, Jared and all of them. And this sister comes to me and she said, Jared Ball and all they had a thing and they asked me to come and talk at Howard. And I went to talk, and you know what the sister came up from there, she says, I am 40-something years old, and I am thinking of going to work, after I finish talking, for the CIA and for defense intelligence. How do I, and then she asked me, how do I help black people and move forward and get into the CIA and the FBI? You understand that? In other words, I'm saying to you that there are more and more of us who not just going to Wall Street, who not just going to corporate America, who not just going to the politics, but who are going into agencies that are preparing for us, those who may decide to lead or those who may decide to speak out, speak truth to power, as Damu said. They are preparing a menace, a Frankenstein monster for the future, and Malcolm warned us about that Frankenstein monster. We better take it seriously.
if we have a short comment from the panel, it's cool too. Maybe we should do that. Maybe we'll just close out with short comments
give them
from the
a chance,
panel.
yeah.
Can we do that?
Yes.
Short comments? And hopefully no one busts a blood vessel up here. I thought we were going to have to go into CPR on my good friend Acklyn.
You.
And then Nkechi went off on me.
I was worried about you.
Riley went off.
I was worried about you.
Ina was cool. Ta-Nehisi was cool.
Where's this guy running?
You gonna make a comment? Okay, good.
Okay,
Okay,
start with your son since he started first.
Okay, we're gonna start with Ta-Nehisi first.
Wow, it's been intense. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I was very glad to be here. If I had to sum up, once again, what Malcolm meant to me, it's funny because after this book, the word reinvention has got a terrible name. So I think we'll stick with a word that we were using earlier, and that was transformation, self-transformation. And the thing that I'm always reminded about Malcolm X, the thing I take home with me personally in my heart when I'm not talking to anybody or anything like that, is this right to transform yourself through your own efforts. When I was young, and we would see all these films about the civil rights movement and people getting beat over the head and this, that, sprayed with water hoses, there was always this problem of, well, if white people don't allow you to do it, you can't have it. If you can't convince them to love you, you can't have it. And so it's this notion that your own liberation, your own right to transform yourself was dependent on somebody else. And I can't tell you that I was specifically aware of that, but it was definitely lurking in the subconscious. And the attractive thing about Malcolm to me was through your own private actions, through your own reading, through your own study, through how you walk down the street, through how you talk to your mother, through how you talk to your father, you can transform yourself. You can liberate yourself. You don't have to lean on nobody. You don't have to ask other people to love you. Love yourself first. And I know that sounds cliche, but sometimes cliche things are true. So.
Okay, I just want to say that don't let Maribel's book be your only thing you read about Malcolm. That's all I say. I mean, there's a wealth of information and material out there. Someone mentioned Brother Zach Condo's book dealing with unraveling the conspiracies, and there's even Spike Lee's movie. And I mean, I know people say, there are issues here, there with the autobiography, etc. But explore it from a number of different aspects as well. And the final story has not been written because we have not seen all those documents in terms of the extent of the COINTELPRO, the FBI's illegal war against the black community and other communities as well. So that book is still yet to be written. But then the final thing I would like to say is I really would like to see some analysis at some point with respect to the movements that sprang from Malcolm. And I know many of us here are part of some of those movements, and that's all I'll say.
That's great.
And thank you so much, Brother Heidi and John, for bringing us all together.
I want to say thank you very much for being here, and thank you for this opportunity to engage each and every one of us in a dialogue that I'm sure will continue over time. Malcolm will not be the first that people will write or think about, but he should always remain the first in our consciousness as someone whose presence elevated us to another level of consciousness. I'm sure they're going to do the same thing on George Jackson, on Huey P. Newton, on Angela Davis, on Assata Shakur, and the list goes on and on and on. I'm sure we will see the same thing about Steve Biko, and Kwame Nkrumah, and Tom Mboya, and the list goes on and on and on and on. What do we have to do then is prepare ourselves, and prepare our children and grandchildren that they will know something about the Malcolms that have influenced our time, our historical moment, and our ability to be able to say that we are extensions, of the Malcolms of the universe. And in so saying, that we will be able to sing, "No more auction block for me."
Again, like everyone else, I want to thank everybody for being here. And I also want to say that the most important thing that I think that I can say about Brother Malcolm, again, is that you can learn from him. There's plenty of material out there that he left that you can read and learn from, and you need to do so. You need to pursue as much knowledge as you can. I hate to quote a slave-owning or an enslaver of African people, but on the front of the James Madison building of the Library of Congress is a statement that goes, "Knowledge will forever govern ignorance, and a people who mean to govern themselves must arm themselves with the power that knowledge gives." I don't think there's anyone that I've come across in my lifetime who understood what Madison was saying than Brother Malcolm did. He understood the importance of knowledge, the importance of going into situations, knowing what's going on, having done your homework. Just good intentions are not enough. One of the things that led to so many problems, I think, for us, too many people, was that they thought that if they had good intentions and they went the right way, that was all they had to have. Good intentions are not enough. You got to have knowledge. You got to seek and pursue knowledge. And then once you get that knowledge, you have to be able to communicate it and spread it to others. That's what Brother Malcolm did. He was a reservoir of knowledge. But he also, as Brother O'Donnell said, he was a student. He used to go in Michelle's bookstore and actually stay there all night. Mr. Michelle would just close the store and lock it up and leave him in there in those books. He would stay in that store all night long, reading books and learning more. It got to the point where people would write him Malcolm X, Harlem Bookstore, and he would get the mail. He would get the mail because people knew exactly what he was talking about. I mean, that's why he was able to do what he did, my brothers and sisters. That's why he was able to accomplish all the things that he accomplished. Because he understood the importance of knowledge. And of gathering knowledge, of absorbing knowledge, and of then distributing that knowledge to other people. He understood the importance of that. One last thing, again, a quote from, and probably somebody that a lot of people have bad vibes about, Nelson Mandela. But I thought the quote was good. He said, "A good head and a good heart are a formidable combination." Brother Malcolm had a good head and a good heart. Thank you.
Once again, we want to thank Holly.
Well,
we want to thank Diana. We want to thank everyone here for coming out. Look.
Please remember that when things get rough, you can always leave over there and come here to Sankofa Books and sit down and relax. Because this is the liberation space and the liberation zone.
Brief. Basically, I wish we had everybody here, but these are the two loyal ones that showed up. And one of the things I want to say is I think I'm now seeing the power of having recorded this materials, and we have hundreds and hundreds of these tapes in our archive. And now I was sitting there, trying to see how to help my vigilant wife in her preservation crusade, and hopefully that we can transfer them better, edit them better, and present them. But in the future, as Jordan said, we're going to have, I think we're going to have a screening like tonight again and again. And so keep looking at our website, and hopefully you will join us and bring more friends. And so initially, what I want to really ask you guys is not the topic that we did, although this was how we wanted to close all the installments we did on Malcolm X. And we thought it, and the young people here looked the archive and said, well, this is a very important, material to close it in. And so, whatever you feel you can address, but also talk about preservation and archive, which is now where we are embarking seriously.
Okay, first of all, I think it's very important that you've kept this because it has a lot of very, very solid, important and useful information in it if we're to continue doing what we're doing. I think I've kind of changed a little since I did that, because my position now is, and this is where I get some criticism. Whenever we start thinking about something concrete for us to do as a people. Even today, we seem to feel as though we got to get everybody. And my position has become like this. If you're talking, let's say, to 20 people, and then you say we want to do so and so and so and so, something very productive, for our people, and how many people who want to participate? I want to get, and 5 people say I'm ready. The way I feel nowadays, I would take those 5, and I'm not going to go and say, well, I'm going to try to change those 15. I'm not doing that anymore. I'm 87 years old. I just don't have time for that. I want to take those 5 and get them teach them and get them and provide as much to them as I possibly can, so that they can then pass it on to others. And I think that we should have. I would love to see us sometime in the next year have a kind of a get-together where we say, if you believe in the absolute importance of black unity and the absolute importance of Pan-Africanism, please come to this meeting. If you don't believe in those 2 things, or you kind of worried about, please stay home. We want to get the true believers together, organized, and moving, and then you reach out to people who you have to convince. That's my position now.
So, Holly, you want us to comment on the preservation? You want us to comment on the presentation, I assume, right?
Well, the presentation is whatever you feel like saying, whatever you feel like inspired.
Let me add a few things and then pass it to you. I want people to know, those of you who are here, you have to know that Shirikiana and me believe in, beyond our capacity to preserve material. We see our generation like
a candle burning on both ends at a time when preservation documentation is its weakest. When you think of it, thanks to Paul Coates, who publishes them, a great deal of the materials that were generated in the 1930s, 40s, black people had an amazing archive when I think of it compared to now. And so one of our aim is, we have hours of documentary film we did on Peter Bailey, for example. We have not cut it. We have the material sitting because I'm involved in a major film editing that is not letting me have free access, but we're looking for young film students in a time of transactional relationship where duty and preservation and history and heritage is not the criteria of the bartering system. And so we have a film, we have a long, I'm talking about documentary film that should be finished, but at least should be preserved. Professor Acklyn Lynch, the brother you saw in the tape, we have a film on his life, his origin, his upbringing, etc. We have on his life, on his origin, upbringing, and everything. We have a film on Brother or the same thing. Sister, Dory Ladner. We have a whole documentary material. Because we didn't edit it because of, again, we just at least said, let's document them. And some have passed. And, it's our principle, we're the only people, I think, who have any film footage on the last days of Maurice Bishop. We're the one who have footage on Asada Shakura before she escaped out of prison. A documentation we filmed in the prison. We have the last footage of Thomas Sankara before he was executed. Sharik and me shot it in Burkina Faso. We have a film on Elaine Brown, Taste of Power. We have, it's amazing volumes of preservation we have. Professor Chancellor Williams, not extensive, but at least we documented him when he had lost his eye and he was living on the Widner building. And we have Hakim Adabudi, Sonia Sanchez footage. This is a film footage to, fill a documentary film. And so there's another giant here that's sitting there. All I wish is to get a crew of camera people to go to his printing press and shoot him before he sells it. I don't know if he's planning to sell it, but before he, if he is going to capitulate, I want to really film before that, because I admire his institution. He is one reason we have a lot of books that are usually rare books, because of his effort. Documenting him, is our plan. Kasahun Chakola, his friend, we want to document. And so, this is part of that, really, more than what, it speaks to you. We have a whole extensive, in fact, I found a sister from the film workshop we gave to start editing Acklyn Lynch's documentary. So, etc. This is where we are. And, to me, I don't know, I think I'm glad we did the spirit of what is Malcolm to me. And I don't know if you remember, we also did extensive community debate on who is Obama to me. Extensive. And I'm glad we documented that. So I don't know if that would help you to get good.
Yeah, it doesn't help me too much at all. But it's okay.
He's lying. He got now. He's awakened now. First he was sleeping in my house.
No, you know what I do want to. I don't have a lot to add to what you're saying, really. I mean, I'm glad that you guys have done the work, and you are doing what needs to be done at this point, and that is actually it's relative to what Peter is saying. It's like you don't have the capacity right now to do all of that editing, but you got to begin somewhere. And so you do one, and then you do another one, and you do another one, and you do another one. It's just like anything else. I'm saying it's relative to what Peter's saying. And Peter, I have to tell you, I know that you have me by a few years, but your position is a position that I never talk about. But it is the position I assumed when I left the Black Panther Party. And that was a position that I would never wait. I would never wait on other people. I would never wait until we got a group of people together. We began, folks who may not know, we began which was the George Jackson prison movement, meeting week after week after week with people who said they wanted to change the world. And all of that stuff fell apart. The first time we did one program. And so it was for me to go forward and with whoever showed up. And that was 2 people. And it actually ended up being 1 person and me and then others. And that has to do with, there's an old urban guerrilla movement called Tupareros that used to be out of South America, and I'm trying to remember where it was in South America. But I remember reading at one point about the philosophy of just moving forward with who you have. So with Peter, what you're saying to me that resonates is, I don't care if 25 people, I'm not waiting for 25 people. I'm not waiting for 15, 20 people. I'm going to go ahead and go forward if I need to go forward. And if that's what's right, that's what I'm going to do. Which goes back again, Holly, to you've got so much material, and the only way you can do it is by doing it one at a time. Because if you wait, and that is the editing of it. The preservation is a whole nother thing. My thing on that again is we need a strong alliance that's going to preserve that material beyond you, beyond Shrikiana, beyond your children. That's got to be struck. But the editing and stuff, to get that stuff into a usable state, is what you're doing. Now, that has nothing to do with what we just, what I watched here. I'm glad you preserved that also, because I really forgot what my role was in that. I didn't remember. I just didn't remember. But I could not keep up with Acklyn. I mean, Acklyn, I don't know how he got out of here without busting a vein. I don't know. I will tell y'all this. When I left, I talked with Ta-Nehisi, and Ta-Nehisi was shaking out the door. But I understand now, sitting back watching. No, but it's good that you preserve that. The one thing I will say about this that's clear, we're talking about the book and we're talking about Manny Marable. There were 2 responses to Manny Marable, a book that we published that was in the works at this time, and then the book that Haki published. I consider that to be high water. That now our books never got the traction or the play that Manny Marable's book got, but we in fact did what black publishers are supposed to do. We responded, and we responded to a threat, and we were able to do it. There were people in our community who did the writing, and they put the material, but it needed to be published. And I'm so glad that Third World Press came forward as they did, and I'm so glad that we were able to do it. And both of those books are still in print and available from Sankofa. Thank you.
What are those books?
I think I can remember Haki's, the name of Haki's book, Third World Press, was By Any Means Necessary. And ours had to do with Manny Marable, and you have to forgive me because I'm forgetting the name, but it had to do with reversing. Manny Marable was studying, or call itself reinvention of, oh gosh, what did he call the book? he called it forgive me for modeling this, but it's something like the reinvention of Malcolm X or something like that. And ours, oh no, reconsider. It was
Reinvention.
It was reinvention. Okay, whatever it was, we did the lie of reinvention. Okay. Ours focused on Manny Marable and his distortedness. Okay. But I've been sitting here trying to remember the name. It's so many titles. I'm sorry.
What was that book that you guys put together?
That was, you have the book here, and it's not the reinvention of Manny Marable. Okay, that's what it is. That's what it is. Okay, it's the lie of reinvention. That book probably has about 20 people who are commenting and from all different perspectives on Manning's book. We have to. I mean, it's our right to respond. We have to respond. If Mike Dyson, who I love, who's a good friend, Gates, if those folks are saying this is good and we know it's bad, you've got to have an instrument to respond. And again, that's where Black Classic Press stood in that chasm, and that's what Third World Press did. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if he sold 1 million books and we sold 200. History will record that response, and that's what's important. At least that's what I think.
I would just like, sounding repetitious, that I think one of the mistakes that people such as myself have made in the past 25 or 30 years, again, is that we kept trying to, there was something would come up, and we want to do something. And we'd have a meeting, and maybe 40 people would show up to the meeting to talk about it. And then we say, well, now what are we going to do about it? And discuss it, that kind of thing. Who's going to participate? Out of those 40 people, maybe 10 people would agree to do something. And instead of taking those 10 people and doing something concrete, maybe not as big as we had originally planned, but we could do something concrete with those 10 people. We would spend all of our time trying to change the minds of the 30, and it ended up nothing happened. And so I would like to say nowadays, folks, pull together, get together with the people who are the true believers, the people who believe, as I said before, in the absolute importance of Black unity as something that we need, and in an importance of Pan-Africanism. In other words, our connection with people of African descent on the continent who share our beliefs. And to me, if we would do that, if we would come up with something concrete that we are doing, a publication or a TV program or something concrete that we were doing, that eventually it would grow. But instead of spending our time, my thing nowadays is, what are we going to do? What are we going to do about something? What are we going to do about what what is going on now with the new president? Not sit back and spend hours talking about what he has done, because we already know that the man is nothing new. We present him as though he's kind of something new on the American political scene. He's not. What we need to do is talk about what are we going to do as a people to more effectively promote and protect our interests in this society. And so that's what I would like to see, a conference or a gathering of something, and literally, as I said before, anybody who comes who wants to be persuaded or talked about, tell them, come back later. We want the true believers. We want the true believers to get together and start talking about concrete things we are going to do so that we can more effectively in this society and in this world promote and protect the interests of people of African descent, because it's getting rough out there. It's getting rough out there, but because we have so often trying to get everybody, and you got to get this, you got to do this, you got to do that. No, most every successful thing in the history of man has been launched by a minority of people. It grew as they began to do things, and things happened, and then it grew and grew and grew. But it was never launched by the majority. It was never, as far as I know. Now, I don't know of anything. Maybe there is, but if it is, I don't know about it. Mm-hmm. It was always something that was launched by a serious, dedicated minority. And I feel as though at this state, in this country, in 2025, that is what we need to do now, rather than trying to get everybody, come up with something that everybody can come to, because it's just not going to happen right now.
It's interesting. I'm going to underscore Peter again, okay? Because when Peter was talking in the film, it was interesting. He was talking about the newsletter and how important Malcolm saw that vehicle, and Peter talked about reproducing it on a mimeograph machine, and many of you guys may not even know what a mimeograph machine is today, but it was a duplicator, and sometimes they ran by hand, and sometimes they ran by electric. I'm going to underscore again, because again, in leaving the Black Panther Party, that's actually where Black Classic Press started. It started on a mimeograph machine, and then it went to, we were fortunate, really, really fortunate, because it was a brother was selling a printing press, and it was a tabletop press similar to the mimeograph machine, and he wanted $300 for that press. That's really where we started, Holly, and it was a matter. That's where I started, because I bought the press, but I did it because someone who believed in me, someone who believed, a sister, she got her welfare check. And she said, Paul, I got $100. You can have this to buy it. And another brother who had gotten turned out of the service had his money. He said, here's $200. I got the other $200. And they gave me that money, and we began producing the first books literally on that mimeograph machine, that tabletop press. And so it's not a matter of waiting until all the stars align and all the pieces come together. It's like Sankofa. You didn't wait for everything to get together. It was a matter of moving out and doing the things that you were capable of doing at the time, whether it was with other people or not. In our case, it wasn't. It was like two people that got together. So it's a matter of not waiting. I think that's, not waiting for all of the stars to align. If your heart is calling you to be in action, be in action. And it doesn't have to be, one of the great things, and I'll be quiet, Peter, in a minute, but one of the great things about the resistance that we're watching now, you guys see all the hand-drawn signs? People are not going to the printers and getting those signs printed. They're expressing themselves in the moment and at the moment, singularly. It's very, very powerful, and we all have that power. I'm sorry, Peter.
Okay, and I would just like to say, and in order to do the type of thing that I was advocating, one of the most important things you must have is a place where you can get information. And we got it. Right here, we're sitting right now in a place where it's just full of information that any group that is serious about, any group of people who are serious about organizing and doing something concrete, the information is all here. So that gives us a head start. Having a place where the information that we need to work with and work from and work by and increase and learn from, it's already here. So it's up to us It's up to us. I've reached a point now, and I get criticized sometimes for this, is that I put some of the things that's happening to us today is our fault. It is really our fault because we have not, what is going on now has been at least predictable for the last 30 years, let's say. Has been at least predictable. And what do? Nothing. Except shout and yell and go through things and run around but we never got a serious organization, a serious movement that would enable us to be in a position to defend ourselves about some of the stuff that is going on. And so I'm telling you folks, man, if you're serious about doing something that will more effectively promote and protect the interests of our people, we, like I say, we have a source of information here. Whatever information we need, it's right here. All we got to do is use it and follow it and help with it and increase it and make sure that whatever we gain is there so that people can get the information. We have sufficient people to do what we need to do to promote and protect our interests in this society.
Paul, you got
I'm
more?
done.
You're done?
I'm done.
My hand is stuck. Well, thank you so much. Let me just thank Jordan. You really did a good intro, my brother. Abel, I hope the camera work is better than what I did in that place by myself. Yeah, I was actually, but I wouldn't have no excuse. And where is Yonata? I tell him I thanked him also for the, preparing the room. And I just want you to know, I think I'm always disagreeing with Peter intentionally about don't come if you don't want to be serious. I think seriousness is escalatory. An individual process, if somebody is like just lost their lover, that person, until that person comes out of the quagmire of, the devastation of love and loneliness, we can't expect them to be ripe for the moment and the struggle. I always disagree with him, but I also know what he's saying. Because Shurikiana and me, initially, we started a distribution company. I didn't have no problem in terms of distribution. My films were being distributed in New York and Europe, but I felt the very community, the African filmmakers, meant a lot to me. I didn't want to be an isolated, vertically mobile, nice boy to the system. I felt the collective uprising or the collective rising, communally rising together, holding hand was very critical. So we did a series of conferences at Howard. In fact, Sterling Brown was in one of the meetings. He sat in the back, listened to us. I'm sure he was laughing like hell. But, what we did was we tried to create filmmakers collectively, or even if we don't agree on each other's politics or approach of cinema, we felt we should organize together and demand equal payment for our works. Because at the time, in the 70s, even PBS has two kind of wage system. If it's a European American white movie, they have per minute a certain kind of value. Our films were like Black History, Desperate Time, Liberal Fragility is looking for black films, and we're desperate to let them have it for nothing. So we wanted to organize ourselves and began to distribute, put all my resources. When I sold a film for a German television, I took that money and put it into a distribution company where we started 20 or 25, 30 African and African American filmmakers, and we were distributing all over the United States through school systems, museums, etc. But we also felt filmmakers deserved 60% because we're not business people. Sharika and I were idea people. And 60%, usually the system gives 40% to filmmakers, 60% for themselves. And we have no cash flow, no bank loan, nothing, using our own resources. And what happened was basically we were unrealistic about giving 60% of the profit to the filmmakers. The other part of it was the filmmakers didn't want to accept Kathy Collins, maybe. Yeah, Kathy came, was very supportive. Most of them just want their payment on the annual that we're supposed to pay. And they didn't care about coming and working. Sharika's working the distribution, and me and her and my family is doing distribution. Filmmakers were just receiving, their royalty. And so we decided we're in the wrong time. And this is just to support you, Peter, to say we're in the wrong time. So we pulled back and became only husband and wife partners. And that's how we built Sankofa. That's how we build our distribution network, our films, etc. And I understand that. I understand it to a point. Even Bradford Young, who's a cinematographer who's from Howard, and me were developing a Nat Turner story because my interest was how did Nat Turner, because of the agony issue raised by these two elders here, we felt how did Nat Turner make the others believe his mission? Because Hollywood always misrepresents uprisings. And I said, if I'm having a problem organizing filmmakers to unite, how do one organize in slavery time, and other enslaved population to join Nat Turner or Denmark Vesey or Gabriel Prosser? And we start developing a script. We start going and finding out many interesting things about how Nat Turner got his followers. And so for me, the ripeness of the individuals come also from personal location in class, personal location in the stratification of oppression. And it doesn't guarantee all the time, like a homeless person might be so demoralized, may not be ripe to join an organization. But again, the personal wounds, the personal lacerations play a role in the way one is ready to join a movement. So those conditions are really what I would like to question, because I've been, hearing Peter, and his partner is sitting there, and they had a meeting. They told the people, don't come if you're not serious. And I was watching it intentionally to see how is black people who says, don't come if you're not serious, get audience anyway. And so I saw through the recorded video of this guy and his partner to see how many crazy black people went there. Because if you say to me, if you're not ready, don't come, okay. There are nightclubs and beer halls and many crazy places to go. So to me, I think it's out of these desperate situations. When for example, to me, Paul, he's like really, in film world, for example, in film production, people don't know that my models for independence are really black publishers. Haki, Kasaun, this guy, they're my models because that's how I want film to be produced in the way. But the problem here is every time I meet them in Chicago in the Haki's meeting or go to, Paul Coates and see Paul Coates here, it's just how do you get black people believe such, when you think of it, there were more black people who believed that handwriting publication in Mississippi in the 1700. They had more. The church group, the Denmark Vesey Church, had more group to really take around the newspapers. What is wrong with us now? To me, when I think of it, with much better tool, like his printing press. Listen, I didn't care about his problem. His, financial problem, nothing. The smell of the chemical, the machine. I felt he had a rocket. He was running NASA in Baltimore. That's how I felt. I felt so inspired to be around the smell of a publisher, black publisher. So I'm saying, what's wrong with black people to say, no, you're tired, we don't take over, we bring this much money into it. When you, especially to see in the entertainment world, neurotic black people who spend so much money to go to jail, being decadent. Can you imagine this guy's can run an industry after industry in every city? Some of these knuckleheads I'm thinking of, I don't know which ones you're thinking, but these knuckleheads, loud, bombastic Negroes on television and film and entertainment, what the hell is wrong with them? How can they come out of that historical circumstances of enslavement and struggling people, resisting people, and be so decadent and careless and scoundrels on economic thing? Black collectively never saw such money. The money one Negro is spending for court, black people for 100,000 years did not see that kind of money. So to me, this discrepancies is what we have to look at. What is wrong with us? To me, I'm serious, because I know, that there are many people who believe, like, in the way they praise me for the efforts I made. I think the believers Peter is talking about, if you come to my congregation and film, I got many people who think I'm like something big. And when I know where I'm going back, the wretched base I have with my wife, it's not compatible. I'm serious. I'm telling you, when I'm in an event place, I'm surrounded. You think like I'm this richest cat who has no problem meeting mortgage. And so I know these are believers who say to me, go on, brother. But then I don't find them. And I can't even say that because it's also a contradiction. How in the hell did Sankofa succeed but by black people? Black people who enabled me to get this place. Because they went past leaflet all over every state. We opened our film to make the film, to put my film on the map of the world all the way to South Africa. So I'm like now in contradictions. I've seen black people are like sleeping giants who put me on the map on one movie I made, Sankofa. This I'm saying, this is like to me the most conflicting things. And I know what Peter is saying. I know how fed up he is, but at the same time, I'm saying to myself, where did we go? Where is this thing that, you know what I'm saying? I'm talking too much, saying nothing, maybe.
Because sometimes, I'm a journalist, and sometimes we tell lies to ourselves. Black people in the United States of America collectively have enough income to do anything that we need to do. We do not have enough to do everything that we want to do. But collectively, we have sufficient funds to do anything that we need to do to promote and protect our interests. But you would never you never hear us talk like that. We really have got to understand that it is up to us, not up to anybody else, what is going to happen to us in this society and in this world that we live in, talking about people of African descent all over the world. It's up to us. And I really believe that as of right now, we have sufficient collective income to do what we need to. But are we going to do that? And that's the question. Like I say, and I say what we want to do. But for us to sit around and try to always act like we are just so poor and out of it that we don't have the money to do nothing, that is a bunch of crap. We have sufficient funds to do anything in this society that we need to do to effectively promote and protect our interests.
Paul, you finished. You look like you're praying now, saying, when is Haile going to finish this thing? But let me say this thing. One thing I want to say. Huh? I'm praying for Haile. Yeah, I want. First, thank you, folks. I know this is our blues. Why not? We didn't charge you, so get it as it comes. But the last thing I want to ask is a very private story, but I didn't want to do it until they finish talking and committing themselves to me. What kind of diet did you do from the film to where you are now? I'd like to buy the same diet pill you have, both of you. What do you guys do to slim down? Did you see them in the film? Especially this one here. What was your diet formula? Thank you so much. You know, you are precious to us in Sankofa. I can speak for Sharik and me, for all the employees here, Paul Coates and Peter Bailey. You guys are like our family here. It's your support that has kept us going. It's amazing that we still are doing what we've been doing for a while.
Let me respond to what he asked. I responded, a friend of mine who's a doctor told me in straightforward terms that if you continue at what you're doing, you ain't gonna be around here much longer. And believe me, I got my lesson from that. And so
was that Oprah? Was that Oprah?
I learned to watch my eating and to be more careful about that.
Which is not true. I know him. I filmed his sisters. I've seen him, what they feed him. When he's away from them, he loses weight. When he's near them, and the salt he eats alone is like amazing. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.